Welcome back to Air Prime, ladies and gentlemen. We now get into conversations surrounding politics. Most recently, the resignation of Marsha Walker from the United National Congress position. She hasn't resigned from the UNC, but she's resigned from the position of Diego Martin West coordinator. She's with us actually via Zoom this morning. Good morning, Ms. Walker, and welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Well, a reason was actually given as per your resignation from the party, and it's in relation to some...
Post my party.
Sorry, from Post, not party. Thank you. In fact, ironically, I'm the one that introduced you saying it wasn't from the party.
Yes, and I was very happy that you made sure to state that clearly.
But it was in regarding to disagreement with the selection of another official from the party, as per stated in the press. But in regards to that, was this raised prior to the election?
Yes. Okay, so in this particular case, a wife had come to me and she brought the police reports, the restraining order, etc. So I went to, at that time, I'd gone to the deputy political leader. We sort of have a chain of command, right? Mm-hmm. And in terms of like PNM seats, we have coordinators. So like shadow MPs, where we would run a parallel organization, etc. And so we report to DPL Drilling John. I went to her and explained what had happened, and she did seem, quite taken aback. She did advise in terms of like what to put in the email. I wasn't very close to the political leader at that point in time. But I didn't really have, let's say, I could just pick up the phone and be like, hey, boss, this is what's going on. So she told me, what to put in the email, that you've spoken to me, I've advised you, whatever. And so I did that. That was March 4th or something last year. Mm-hmm. So it was quite a while ago. And then we had internal elections. So they had a meeting, they explained that it's difficult and whatever. And I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want to make this about the person. And if I give too much detail, I may give away the person's identity or whatever. But anyways, so it was something that was raised during the internal elections. I had raised the issue again because the person holds several official posts in the party. And so during as the final, coming back to now, they appeared on the list of alderman selection. And I was sent an email the day after the local government election asking for my opinion on who should be alderman, which is ironic. It's kind of weird in the first place because we were not given, we didn't have enough votes to get an alderman. In fact, we didn't contest enough seats in the Diego Martin Borough Corporation to get an alderman. So I don't know why we were even going through that process. But it felt like a total slap in the face. As a coordinator, I obviously was not even being respected in that role. But I could not continue in good faith to keep working in that position. I think that our woman's arm was taking, and I'd said all of that in the first email, actually. We'd taken such a hard stance on domestic violence and whatnot. And of course, the political leader used to say, clear your name and come back. That was something that in her reign as prime minister, she'd upheld that Westminster principle, that in politics, the appearance of justice and the appearance of integrity and stuff, that was something that was always very high on, priorities. And that was a standard that we had set, clear your name and come back. So I felt as though I was left with no choice but to resign because it didn't seem as though we were adhering to that standard of clear your name and come back.
If that be the case, would you argue that dissatisfied with the party's approach to dealing with the report, even given the historical instances where the opposition leader has suggested clear your name and come back, your resignation from the position as coordinator, is that one of which is based off of principles rather than anything else.
Yeah. In a nutshell, yeah. I mean, I've always said to certain people that speak out about the party that I would have liked for them to speak out at a time when they were in office, um, and not after, like you would have put in a nomination and only after that, when you were rejected, then you come and speak out. Again, in politics is a really tricky game, right? From the time I was labeled a politician, all of a sudden, all the activism that I did with parenting, everything that I had done before, it didn't matter anymore. I became a politician. Growing up, you hear lawyers are liars. So we brand every lawyer a liar. And in politics, it's so difficult already to prove your integrity. I mean, from the time you enter politics, good people stay away from politics. So if you are willing to enter politics, then it has to be that you're not good. That's a way that people think. So we have to, as politicians, and to me, I would want to say new politicians, because we want to. I'm so tired of hearing politics has a morality of its own. Politics is not a human being. We give that morality to politics. And for too long, we just kind of think, well, as the status quo, politics has a morality of its own. And that can't be. We are a new generation of politicians, so we have to set the tone.
But
We have to give politics a morality.
Ms. Walker, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying. However, if it was one in which you stood on a certain principle, why is it that you so chose to contest the election on behalf of the United National Congress? Why not resign from the position before the election itself?
Well, first of all, the email didn't come to me before the election, so again, I have to be careful because too much detail could, give away the whole situation, the families, who they are and whatnot, right? But the email came after the fact.
No, but the matter was, but you reported the matter before the election, and you were dissatisfied.
And I was given certain assurance.
Yeah.
I was given certain assurances. So the email basically would have confirmed that those promises were not going to be kept. Yeah, so I had, and people like to think, I'm a hothead and I act emotionally, but I try to be very fair to everyone involved. Again, this is politics, right? So I can't necessarily bark at every car that passes. I have to weigh how far, and for some, it may be a different level. You may be willing to go further down the line. But in this case, and in fact, I did actually consider withdrawing my candidacy. I had a lot of challenges with the party. It's difficult because I still do hold a lot of respect for the party itself and for a lot of the members in the party. So, I don't want to take everybody down with this, but I did have a lot of challenges. But withdrawing in the middle of the campaign would have put my other candidates, their work, I knew of candidates who were going through selling their cars to fund the campaign and stuff. There's a lot of sacrifice that happens on the part of the candidate, and the candidates would have suffered the most, not the leadership. And as I said, I had certain assurances that you kept giving promises, and as I said, that email made me realize that you're not in any way. You're trying to keep me quiet, maybe. Just trying to satisfy me. But it was. You weren't going to keep good on your promise. So I had no choice.
Would your approach have been different? In other words, would you have issued your resignation from this particular post, this particular position?
No, remember, I could still have resigned from that post and put a nomination for
No. But what I'm asking in regard to is this: would had you won the election, would you still have resigned from this particular?
It would have been easier, actually, because then you can't really remove me from everything, and it would have been difficult to advise me. So it actually would have been much easier to resign from the post had I won.
So, moving forward now, based off of the principle again that you stood on, are you dissatisfied with the leadership of the party?
Yes. Um, Again, not wanting to air too much of the dirty linen, right? There are things that happen, and I felt as though one, I would work my way up to a place where I do have the leader's ear. I can operate from a place of influence. Again, trying to be fair to everyone involved. So I am going to give it my best shot. I don't believe in judging people based on someone else's experience. You should have your own experience. Um, I definitely don't like how a lot of the local government election was handled. It it was handled in a way that was very disrespectful to candidates, and there is a certain level of ingratitude, but overall disrespect to what candidates give out. It's like, okay, well, it's always seen as some kind of like gift that you get to represent the party. Certainly that's not the case in Diego Martin and the East West Corridor, right? It's not a gift. You know, Many times we're not challenged because they can't find people who want to go in these types of seats. So it is a real sacrifice. It's a real sacrifice to represent UNC in these types of seats where PNM dominates.
But do you feel
Um,
that you had a responsibility or a duty to speak more on these things, you know, as early as, from earlier this year with what was being experienced? I know you said that a lot of assurances were given to you, but even the handling of the election, there seems to be some
well, I
dissatisfaction.
did. Yes. So, well, I did speak out about Jack Warner. But it's such a tricky situation because you don't want to air the party's dirty linen in public, especially when you can push and you can fight. I'm not good at being a yes person. Everybody said that probably would mean that I would be pushed out. But I did believe that, you have to give it your best shot. As I said, I worked hard to get to a place where I had the leader's ear. And we would have what I would consider very respectful discourse and disagreements. But I felt as though I did have her ear. So,
Well, you've
so,
actually
so, so we can keep fighting internally. We can keep back and forth. We can keep wrestling. Um, and let's keep this inside. Let's keep it respectful, but fight for that change that I want to see internally.
Well, you've actually called for the resignation of the opposition leader publicly. Yes, internally you've stated that there are so many bright individuals within the party that they need to be given an opportunity. So there is an understanding perhaps of the change that you want. However, a couple of questions surrounding the call for the resignation of the opposition leader. You said you referred to her legacy. You don't want her to ruin her legacy. But
Yeah.
in your eyes, in your opinion, what is the legacy of Kamla Persad-Bissessar as the political leader of the United National Congress?
No, she would have been the first prime minister. I do think that the 2010 to 2015 reign, I think that she implemented a lot of good legislation. There were a lot of things that I can see, taking away from what the public says, right, and all the propaganda. The procurement legislation, I think that can be one of those things where you say that's her legacy, because for years, for generations before that, we never thought to put in procurement legislation. How can you talk corruption? How can you say that you're serious about dealing with corruption and you don't put in procurement legislation? Children's Authority. He, I think, was one or is the number one prime minister when it comes to dealing with children and issues of the youth. So, as a former prime minister, again, taking away all the propaganda, when you look at the issues and you look at the legislation, you look at, okay, these were things that she definitely tried to work on. And no one is going to expect you to get it right in terms of get the country right in one term. PNM does a really good job at messing us up. So you come in, but at least, as I said, things like the procurement legislation, for sure, you can say, you can stand and say, as a former prime minister, these are things that I would have put into place to bring about change in Trinidad and Tobago. Just like, just like I think I'll use procurement legislation for Mrs. Pasabi Sessa. I think in terms of Mr. Pandy, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. So yes, Manning renamed it, but Pandy was the one who said, we need to save. We can't be an oil-rich country and have a savings account. So I would say that's one of the things where he could say that's his legacy.
So where has it all gone wrong for the opposition leader then?
Right. So you now have, so it's kind of two roles. So she is a former prime minister, but she's a prime minister in waiting. So as a prime minister in waiting now, you have to, so you have to kind of pretend that she's never been a prime minister. What do you expect from a prime minister in waiting? Because you can't hold on to, well, this is what I did in 2010. I mean, that's 13 years ago, right? So you have to talk about, and it's not about, people like to talk about ageism, but it's not an ageism thing, right? There are 40-year-olds who are unhealthy and a 70-year-old maybe fitter and more energetic and everything, so it's not an age issue, right? But you have to say to yourself, am I the person that I was when I was the former prime minister? Do I have all the qualities that I should have as a prime minister in waiting? Because you're not a former prime minister right now. You're acting in the capacity of a prime minister in waiting. A prime minister in waiting, one, should be touching the hands of everybody. You look at, let's say, a US government election and the person who's going up for president, they're out there touching hands, shaking hands. They are walking up and down, in Manhattan, they're up and down the skyscrapers. They're doing what they have to do. The energy is there as a prime minister in waiting.
So then, Ms. Walker, let me interrupt you there and ask you, do you want to be the political leader of the United Nations?
Oh, definitely not. No. At least, not now, maybe 10 years, 15 years. We'll see. But I think that there's a lot for me to learn. I have a lot of experience to get. It's not something that's on the cards for me right now.
But do you think the reason that the opposition leader has remained in this position is because there has been no true succession planning within the party?
So I was, and these are some of the things where you go, but you said, and you said, and you said. We were given assurances in the very beginning. And this is where it's also tricky, right? Because so many people like to say, bossy, bossy, bossy. So I made sure to get in a position where persons cannot say bossy. If bossy, boss know my number to call me. But we were given assurances that there was succession planning and she was not going to contest. Very similar to what Dr. Rowley said, I'm not going to contest the 2025 election. And then lo and behold, in this last internal, he put himself back up for political leader. And, and you kind of step back and go, I thought you weren't going to contest 2025. Why are we here? And as I said, there are people in waiting who can take over. Anyways, I have to be careful how much linen I air. But what it's come down to is there is now a desperation to hold on to it. So every decision that you make now is not based on what's best for Trinidad and Tobago, but what's best for me staying in this position as political leader.
Ms. Walker, let me
run the country like that. You can't run the party like that.
Why is it still you're choosing to be very cautious in your approach to the conversations?
I do believe that in terms of the United National Congress, that we are the best vehicle to take Trinidad forward, especially where we're at. The Prime Minister himself said that we're at crossroads, right? And it's a PNM that put us there. Our murder rate is out of control, the employment, our economy. The People's National Movement have taken Trinidad some 20 years back. So the next government has to be almost perfect in their execution of governance, and I don't think that there's any other party that can really come in and do what needs to be done. So I do not want that the UNC, the vehicle UNC, be tarnished beyond repair. So that is why I'm being cautious.
Do you think that
And trying to be respectful to her legacy as well. You know, I don't want her to be remembered as this desperate person holding on to power, because she has served the country well, which is why I'm saying don't allow your legacy to be ruined, because the things that we're seeing, the party is so divided internally right now. You know, every day it's somebody resigning, every day is somebody upset, every day you're trying to figure out, did she do this because, you know, she's trying to do this and she's trying to, like, that is, first of all, that's not where our energies should be. Our energies should not be in figuring out what move the political leader is doing today to try to keep her in. You know, it should be focused on fixing our country, doing what's best for our country.
Do you think that for all intents, have actually now ruined any of your chances of a political future within the United National Congress, given your particular stance?
Well, no. Just from a very logical point of view, half of the people that were on that opposed her in 2015, you know, Dr. Munilal, Neil Gosain, gosh, I'll have to go through the names, but several of the people that were on different slates opposing her, standing up on platforms talking about her, they're on her NATEX right now. You know, and then, you know, even, I mean, Dr. Munilal would have been the campaign manager for Basio Pandey in 2009, and he would have said things about her. And, you know, he's the deputy political leader right now. So just using logic, you know, a really bad one, if you ask me, would be look at the kinds of things that Jack Warner would have said about her. And he's standing right next to her now, right? In fact, I would argue that the people who speak out seem to be the ones. I mean, look at Gary Griffith. He was very vocal against her. So you don't actually hear about the yes men going forward, because when a regime changes, the yes men tend to be booted out because they don't have the you know, they were yes men because they were making up.
Well, I'll tell you what, Ms. Walker, I understand the approach that you've taken. I think we all have seen that as well. But we more or less out of time. I'm going to quickly squeeze in the question, and that is, the opposition leader has responded. She says that the party is a democratic one. However, she says that she's not leaving, but she feels sorry for you. How do you respond to this?
Well, I did break down some of her interview on Facebook. One, I want to categorically state that she is telling a lie in saying that I never came directly to her. We have all the WhatsApp correspondence and emails to prove it. What you should feel sorry for is Trinidad and Tobago, because until you step down as opposition leader, we will have PNM in power. And even if we manage to scrape a win, because Farley does well and wins Tobago, we will not have the 38 seats that we need to change the constitution, which is very, very important. And if you speak about democracy, I find that to be very hypocritical, because she removed me as vice chair of the PR standing committee with no good reason, first of all. And that is a position that's an elected position. So how can you just come and put a one-liner on a chat with 40 persons, hey, you know, remove Marsha as vice chair? So if we're talking democracy, then, you know, again, let's stop with the hypocrisy. And we can even argue that her position, you know, is a bit of a disrespect to the Constitution of the United National Congress. Because, of course, we know, you know, the 3 years versus the 2 years, NATEX is not supposed to run on the same time with the political leader. But, you know, she finds loopholes, just like this government. And that is something that that was one of the things that I would fight with her about, you know, like the woman's arm, that those elections are way past due. So how can we stand and say, you know, call elections when elections are due, telling Keith Rowley that, but then internally, we're not doing the same things. And I could name 1,000 times where we have not stuck to the Constitution of the United Nations.
Ms. Walker,
absolute disrespect to it.
I'm so sorry that this is where we'll have to conclude our conversation.
No problem, but that interview was full of hypocrisy.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Ms. Walker.
Thank you for having me.
And if all that you have argued in regards at least to the allegations and what you're suggesting is true, then one cannot disagree with you for standing on principle if all that you're saying is true. But thank you very much for your time this
Thank
morning.
you for having me. Thank you.
All the very best. Ms. Marsha Walker joining us this morning on AM Prime, speaking about not only the legacy of the opposition leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar, but also about her resignation from the party. And whilst not wanting to air all the dirty laundry outside, you can tell that internally the party seems to have a great divide. Anyway,